Good evening, President Kim, faculty, administrators, staff, alumni, students, community members, and distinguished guests. It is my pleasure to welcome you to Dartmouth College's annual celebration of the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. My name is Joan Leslie, member of the class of 2012, and I'm the president of the Afro-American Society here at Dartmouth. I will be your master of ceremonies, and before I continue, please note the use of cell phones is discouraged, and the use of cameras is only permitted by the college photographer and credentialed press. This year's theme for celebrating the legacy of a true visionary is the content of our character, an idea referenced in one of King's most famous speeches, I Have a Dream. Today, we will explore that dream and its evolution through the words of President Kim and our keynote speaker for the evening, former coach Herman Boone. I would like to begin by introducing President Kim, a man who we know very well. I could be here for hours telling you how brilliant President Kim is and how he has been spending his spare time making the health concerns of the world his own through research and travel. But these are things we already know about President Kim. Instead, I prefer to share a short anecdote about President Kim that he has never heard before today. A few months ago, out of the blue, my father called to tell me about an article he'd read about President Kim. He proceeded to read the main points of the article highlighting President Kim's accomplishments through research and achievements over the years. And I thought this list of credentials would never end. But as my father finally caught his breath and reminded me how proud he was that I was at an institution run by a man as intelligent and driven as Jim Young Kim, I was reminded of just how much he is a reflection of Dartmouth's ideological and structural progress as an institution. The last thing my father asked me before we got off the phone is if I knew President Kim, and more importantly, if I had ever shaken his hand. So please join me in the moment my dad has been waiting for, and help me welcome President Jim Young Kim to the stage.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and I want to welcome you all. First, I want to thank Christine Crabb and Gabrielle Luke and the rest of the Martin Luther King Jr. Celebration Committee for their truly tireless effort in coordinating this wonderful series of events. As many of you know, it's not just one day, but it's been a 2-week-long celebration of the extraordinary life and legacy of Dr. King. It's full of lectures and discussions on a wide range of social justice issues, and faculty, staff, and students have all been involved. On August 28, 1963, Dr. King proclaimed, "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." Almost exactly 1 year after that speech, my family arrived in this country. And we arrived in Dallas, Texas, of all places. And I had the opportunity just last week to visit Dallas again. And I actually drove by the school where I had gone to both kindergarten and first grade. But probably in the first few months after we had arrived in Dallas, Texas, my mother, who had received a degree in theology prior to going back to Korea, and so this was before she had us, she was a theologian, and she tried to prepare us for what we were going to find in Dallas. I was 5 years old, my brother was 6, and even back then, my father was studying dentistry at Baylor Dental School. Even back then, coming from Korea, for some reason, he was a rabid football fan. And my mother would tell me stories about what the great receiver, Bob Hayes, who had won a gold medal in the Olympics and then became a receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, I remember her telling us what he went through in Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Texas was not a place that was very, what's the right word, at that time enlightened in terms of race relations. But I never really took it to heart. I never thought it applied to me. And then one day, and it's just one of these things that you never forget. One day, I was playing with a friend from kindergarten, and we happened to live in the same apartment complex. And he invited me into his home. And then his older brother, who was probably 12 or 13, came in the house and saw me in the house and started screaming and yelling at me to get out of the house. And that was the first time I ever experienced the true phenomenon of racism in my life. Now, after that we moved to Iowa, and it was around... that's a joke in New Hampshire? Please. And even at the age of, Reverend King was killed when I was about 9 years old. Maybe it was from that first moment, but I took a tremendous interest in Dr. King. Even tried to read some of his speeches when I was a young man. And I had other experiences, but in Iowa, and for Asians, it was different. It was more ridicule. It was more sort of, well, who are you? It was more, at that time, lucky for us, the television series Kung Fu had come on, so they thought I had special powers at times. But it was mostly marginalization and feeling at times like an outsider. It was not what Dr. King was fighting against. It was not the vicious racism that was experienced by so many African Americans throughout this country. So I have a sense of it. I experience it to an extent, but I think it's hard to understand what Coach Boone was facing in 1971 when he took over coaching that team. The intensity of the hatred is something that very few of you, especially our students, may have ever known. So here at Dartmouth, I think what Coach Boone represents, and I have to say I'm a huge fan of the movie. I've seen it 3 or 4 times. I saw it, when it came out early. Here's what struck me about Coach Boone. And it goes back to what John Sloan Dickey said in an article that he wrote in The New Yorker in the 1950s. President Dickey talked about 2 things. He talked about competence and conscience. And he talked about how Dartmouth students come out with a tremendous competence in engineering, in English literature. There's so many things that we learn that we take out of here as skills. But then he wove this very wonderful, almost dialogue with himself, talking about how competence without conscience, that you only get from what he called the liberating arts, can be worse than misdirected. It can be evil. But he also talked about a wonderful conscience, a wonderful developed conscience without trying to actually affect the world was also lacking. Coach Boone, like many of us, I think, has great ideas about moral character, about what character means. But the really interesting thing about to me, is that he walked into this situation and got this group of people first to face each other really as human beings. I mean, I asked Coach Boone earlier, did that stuff really happen? He said it was remarkably realistic. He forced them to deal with each other as human beings, and then he got them to perform at a level that helped them win the state championship. So not only was he building their character, but he was taking them to a place where they could perform at a level that was just unthinkable when the season started. So I'll leave you with that. Coach Boone, to me, is the embodiment of what John Sloan Dickey talked about when he told us all that in difficult times, in times where racism, marginalization, all kinds of social problems are around you, those 2 core ideas, competence and conscience, will serve you well, just as it has served this great man so well for so long. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Kim. As President Kim just noted, in 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. expressed a hope that his children and grandchildren would experience a world where people are not judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. It is now 2012, the year I graduate from this fine institution, and I question the degree to which we have actually fulfilled this dream here at Dartmouth. We have been encouraging each other to not judge a book by its cover for generations, and we've learned why such an idea is relevant to our growth. When we allow the exterior of an individual to define who they are and what they are, we surrender the opportunity to expand our own horizons. Thus, we place character on a pedestal. However, let us not forget that character is a reflection of our own experiences. Some of the most influential people in the world have graduated from this institution and can say they have shared the Dartmouth experience. Freshman year, you go on a DOC trip. Catch a meal or two with your trippies afterwards, and you will meet some of the most amazing people you have ever crossed paths with. Sophomore year, you are faced with one of the biggest decisions you will ever have to make at Dartmouth. Which Greek house will I join? Will I be amongst the unaffiliated few? And sophomore summer is something that we are all looking forward to because we call it Big Kid Camp. Junior year, you will disappear, traveling around the world on FSPs, LSAs, service projects, and the like. Senior year, you'll return to campus feeling like a freshman again. You've taken at least one picture with Keggy, you're flying from city to city for job interviews, and wondering if this will be the year it doesn't rain on graduation. And you will bleed green for an eternity. See, the Dartmouth experience has been scripted for us, and we can spend our entire 4 years not forgetting one line. But that experience loses its value just a bit when we are all expected to follow the same path. I've learned that it takes courage, drive, and passion to write your own Dartmouth experience, which has been my mission for the past 3.5 years. The content of my character is very much shaped by a small community in the heart of Manhattan. Literally, it's in the northern west side of the city, Harlem. That's where I was born and raised, and I had to decide how my Dartmouth experience was going to be reflective of the place I called home. In 1920, my community experienced a renaissance, defined as a rebirth or a revival. And in 2008, my freshman year, so did I. In my high school, I was one of the few whose experiences inside and outside the classroom were highlighted by my peers, teachers, and faculty. But I got to Dartmouth and realized everyone had a story to tell, and the new me wanted to hear it. But I realized how easy it was to grow comfortable with the familiar. I was hearing stories that differed from my own in details, but the common thread amongst them all was culture and background and race. And everything came back to me being a Black student at Dartmouth rather than simply being a student at Dartmouth. There is a Dartmouth experience. Then there is a Black experience, a Latino experience, an Asian experience, a Native American experience, a lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, and transgender experience, all within our Dartmouth community. And we have allowed ourselves to grow content with these experiences by hiding under our favorite word. You've heard it before, diversity. We've been told what it looks like. Walking across the green, seeing faces of all shades, hearing conversations of all dialects, and my personal favorite, trying the international option of the day at 53 Commons. This, we've been told, is diversity. We see each other, but do not know each other. We know there's probably a story in there, but we are just too nonchalant to ask. Every day, we ignore what makes certain individuals different from ourselves and accept these differences for what they appear to represent. We make assumptions based on the obvious, and this interpretation of diversity allows us to. But when we think about the content of our character, I want us to take a moment and think about where these words come from. We cannot forget a time in our nation when it was illegal for us all to be in the same classroom, dormitory, or even share a space like the one we're gathered in today. We subconsciously make judgments on other people's character based on how they look, how they behave, and who they're surrounded by. But you cannot judge someone's character until you've heard their experiences, and you can only hear their experiences if you allow yourself to. Yes, we have panels and talkbacks and even take the occasional class that pushes the envelope. But we can be more than what we've bargained for in signing our hearts over to this Dartmouth community. we can take advantage of the diversity on campus by embracing our differences rather than simply acknowledging that they exist. See, true diversity looks like me returning to Harlem knowing how to cook Korean food, or campus DJs playing top 40 songs combined with R&B, hip hop, and maybe even a little salsa, or my peers understanding the purpose and foundation of minority Greek organizations on campus, such as the one Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself was a member of. All it takes is reading that one blitz you usually delete first, after the Dartmouth Daily updates, of course, and go to an event that you would have never thought twice about attending. It's a scary thought, I know, but I have found that a school priding itself on diversity has tended to accept the type of individual who can embrace and learn from them. As of now, diversity lives on a page and breathes through its percentages, allowing us to feel comfortable calling Dartmouth a welcoming environment to all. But I am confident that we can move diversity off the page and into our activities, conversations, and hearts. And we can make Dartmouth a place that fosters judgment, not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker of the night, but first, I have to address a rumor going around campus. A few people were saying that Denzel Washington was in the building. I proceeded to ask, great debaters, Malcolm X, John Q, Oscar award-winning Denzel Washington? After some serious investigation, I found the rumor was false, and that the man gracing us with his presence today brings the dedication and passion to achieving true equality in our nation that Mr. Washington could only imitate through film. In the movie Remember the Titans, the world was exposed to how one man could bring a group of young men, regardless of their race, together for the love of football. But former coach Herman Boone's purpose extends far beyond the gridiron and turf. During a time where American society had not fully embraced the integration of blacks and whites, Coach Boone and Bill Yotes started a revolution that the rest of our nation would come to note as a true test for change. Today, it is my honor and privilege to welcome the man whose vision for progress began with the Titans of Alexandria, Virginia, and infiltrated prevailing race relations throughout our nation. And before we welcome Coach Boone to the stage, we will play a clip from a movie we should all be very familiar with, Remember the Titans.
Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. Wake up, gentlemen. It's late. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. All right, listen up. You will follow Doc, myself, and the other coaches. We're going to take a little run through the woods. If you get lost along the way, don't bother coming back to camp. Just hitchhike your hind parts on home. Any questions?
Coach, it's a high school football team. We're not the Marines here.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Tell me where have you been, my blue-eyed son? Where have you been, my darling young one? I've stumbled up on the side of the well-busy mountain. I've walked and I've crawled over 6 crooked highways. Tell you it's hard. It's hard. Well, it's hard.
No. Come on, baby. Can't take no risk. Can't take no risk.
Gonna fall.
Anybody know what this place is? This is Gettysburg. This is where they fought the Battle of Gettysburg. 50,000 men died right here on this field, fighting the same fight that we're still fighting amongst ourselves today. This green field right here, it's painted red, bubbling with the blood of young boys. Smoke and hot lead pouring right through their bodies. Listen to their souls, man. I killed my brother with malice in my heart. Hatred destroyed my family. You listen. You take a lesson from the dead. If we don't come together right now on this hollow ground, we too will be destroyed. Just like they were. I don't care if you like each other or not, but you will respect each other. And maybe, I don't know, maybe we'll learn to play this game like men. Hey!
And now, please help me in welcoming the real Coach Boone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Dartmouth, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Joan, and your gracious, gracious hospitality here in Hanover. And by the way, Happy New Year and Happy MLK Day here on this wonderful campus. Let me thank Gabrielle Luck, Director of Diversity Training and Education Programs, and Marla Severe for this opportunity to be here this evening. And ladies and gentlemen, I can never thank you enough, not only for this invitation to be your keynote speaker, but for your commitment to the students and faculty on diversity here on this campus. One of the great Ivy League campuses in the world where students and faculty make a difference. So good evening, my name is Coach Boone, and you probably didn't know me by now as the real inspiration of that blockbuster movie, Remember the Titans, and he told me night before last in Sacramento, California, to tell you that two-time Academy Award winner, Joan. This movie, ladies and gentlemen, although now 11 years old, continues to send a message throughout the world on lessons of diversity and inclusion. And Dr. Kim, members of the faculty, staff, and students, coaches, and honored guests, welcome and good evening. And thank you all for taking the time out from your busy schedules to come out this evening to honor a man whose unparalleled contributions to the world cannot be surpassed. And you must know that I'm extremely proud and honored that you have chosen me this evening to visit your lovely campus. Welcome to this, your 2012 Martin Luther King celebration, where this year's theme is the content of your character, or our character. Welcome to Dartmouth College, where the focus, as Dr. Kim once said, the focus is on providing the best undergraduate and graduate education to teaching, and to research, one of the best in the country. And Dr. Kim, I realize although your first choice was Denzel Washington, and I can't blame you one bit for wanting the very best for the best done students in all of the Ivy League. And I truly hope that you won't be too disappointed with me this evening. Many people, including his wife, said the other night in California to tell you that, one, you should be glad you got me. I'm cheaper. Two, You got the only one that's better looking than Denzel anyway. Well, I don't know anything about that, but if by chance there is at least one of you out there that believes that, then you probably belong over at Yale. Or maybe it's Harvard. I hope you young people learn early in life that a sense of humor is sometimes a sense of who you should be. And ladies and gentlemen, let me remind you that the movie Remember the Titans is not about football. Contrary to many people's belief, it is not about football. This movie is about some incredible young boys in Alexandria, Virginia, who during some of the most stressful times in America decided to accept the soul of each other rather than reject each other based on the color of their skin. These young men came from diverse families in Alexandria, decided to accept each other's differences rather than put each other down. And this story took place in Alexandria, Virginia during some of the most stressful times in America, when we had the Vietnam War that was tearing our country apart. We had the Pentagon Papers, we had the Kent State shooting, the emergence of the Black Panthers, and many more reasons in Alexandria that people felt that they had a reason to wake up angry about something. But even as we speak this evening, let us remember that the world is celebrating the life and legacy and dreams of Dr. Martin Luther King. Even at the displeasure of many governments throughout the world, the people continue to march on in their names. And thank you all for coming out this evening to this Dartmouth College annual celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King. Your presence here this evening is an indication of your commitment to keep his dream alive. This is probably why tonight I feel that I should be as wise as Solomon, as prophetic as Isaiah, and if you don't mind, I'll try to be as funny as Bernie Mac. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, I promise you I won't bore you. And I won't make anybody run a mile or do any push-ups. Tonight I choose to talk with you about the legacy of Dr. King, diversity, and the issues of character and community. Let me take this moment. I had not planned this, but I got a call today to one of the most dynamic human beings that has ever been sent to Alexandria, Virginia, from Hanover. This lady became a member of the school board and made a difference in Alexandria. This lady is responsible for students learning to accept the soul of each other rather than reject each other because they were different races. This lady is probably responsible for that school called T.C. Williams, now honoring the presence of kids from 80 countries in this world. And there is no discrimination there anymore. People talk in their own language and are appreciated, and they are more than anything else respected, to where respect becomes the emotional glue that binds that team and that school and that community together. Let me introduce to you Mrs. Allison May from Hanover, New Hampshire, who was a school board member, and her father taught here for many years. Allison, if you're there, please stand. There she is. Thank you, Allison. You did a great job in Alexandria. But young people, you must know that long before that movie, Remember the Titans, was made, I had dedicated my life to the visions and dreams of Dr. Martin Luther King. And more than anything else, I tried to make a difference. And I felt many years that the torch was handed to me years ago. And now, as I told some wonderful young people at dinner today, not only do I thank you for your hospitality, but I challenge you, and I want you to know the torch is now handed over to you. Particularly those of you who are positive, those of you who are energetic, and those who do not mind taking the plunge into a sea of ideas for what you believe in. Today, I sincerely hope that Dr. King's vision for our country and you must also be your own. We must just have to believe, young people, and to believe is to have faith. This is what I told the Titans some 38 years ago. Faith in the values of your family, faith in your school, faith in your community. In 1963, let me remind you, in Birmingham, Alabama, Dr. King launched the civil rights movement that shocked the world. By doing so, he demonstrated to the world the power of nonviolent action that he had learned from a great leader in India, Dr. Mahatma Gandhi. Dr. King's eloquent analysis of these events propelled the civil rights movement from a bus boycott to lunch counter sit-ins and prayer marches to the forefront of America's consciousness of justice. Dr. King's life has been immortalized over and over, and we know our history, what he did. We know his dream and we know his vision. And while Dr. King was one of the most powerful speakers history has ever known, his life was his real statement. Therefore, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to note that we gather here this evening not to remember Dr. King's death, but to remember his life. We gather here this evening not for what he could have done with more years on this earth, but rather what he did with the few years that we were granted with him. Not the sadness of losing him, but rather the gift of having known him, or him having touched all of our lives in some way or another. Because his messages of peace and love was universal. And if for no reason, this is why we honor his memory here today. And believe me, none of his eloquent words of Dr. King will mean anything to us as a people unless we make sure that not just one day, ladies and gentlemen, but throughout the year, that each of us will not forget what Dr. King stood for. And for God's sakes, it is up to us to never allow this day, his birthday, to become a retail holiday because of our inattention in Hanover, New Hampshire. So how then can we keep his dream alive? I believe that we as a people can keep his dream alive by passing on his legacy to each birth in our family. You know, today we teach his legacy. Today we teach in our schools system about the life and works of some of the greatest authors God has ever known. Shakespeare, Keith, and Shelley. But as students and parents, we should demand that our schools teach Dr. King, Martin Luther King's work, especially his letter from the Birmingham jail. A literary masterpiece, ladies and gentlemen. And before we get into excerpts from this masterpiece, let me remind you that Dr. King was born January 15, 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia. But did you know that his name at birth was Michael King Jr., not Martin? And after his father, Reverend Michael King Sr. And his father changed their names to Martin Luther King Sr. and Jr. when Martin was just 5 years old. And we know that while in high school, Martin did so well that he even skipped the 9th and 12th grade. Did you know that he entered Morehouse College at the age of 15? And while at Morehouse, he became a great admirer of Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, the famous president of Morehouse College and a well-known scholar of black religion. We also know that it was because of Dr. Mays' influence that Dr. King decided to become a minister in his collegiate year. But did you know that Dr. King was ordained as a minister just before he graduated from Morehouse in 1948? And entered Crozier Theological Seminary, where he earned his divinity degree. From there, he continued on to Boston University, where he got his PhD in 1955. We know that while in Boston, he met the beautiful and lovely Coretta Scott Marion of Marion, Alabama, a music teacher. They were married in 1953 and became the proud parents of 4 children. That he said, he prayed to his God that they would only be accepted and not rejected only on the content of their character. And those children, Yolanda, Dexter, Martin, and Bernice. But we know that also, don't we? After leaving Boston College, he and his wife moved to Montgomery, Alabama, where he became the minister of Dexter Street Baptist Church. And history tells us that because of a little tired lady in Montgomery named Rosa Parks, while one day riding a segregated bus in Montgomery, she refused to give up her seat to a white man and was arrested. That act of courage not only led to Dr. King's involvement in the civil rights movement, but ladies and gentlemen, believe me, that act started the famous Montgomery bus boycott that led to every single civil rights law ever been passed in America until this day. Because of her arrest, black leaders in Montgomery, Alabama, urged Dr. King to work with them in this boycott and begged Dr. King, who was a young minister, to become their leader. Afraid for his life and safety of his young family, Dr. King reluctantly agreed to become their leader of nonviolent and in the Alabama segregated bus system. And because of his involvement, that segregated bus system was struck down and opened integrated seating on public transportation that became the law of our land. This led to freedom riders in public buses all over the land, and although many buses were bombed, these people marched on with dignity. And one day during the boycott, an old 80-year-old lady, like everybody else, walked during that bus boycott. And she was sitting on a curve one day, resting for a while, and Dr. King saw her and immediately approached her and said to her, "Mama, I know you're tired, and I know you're weary, but you have my permission to get on that bus and ride it if you need to." This little old lady looked up at Dr. King and said, "Dr. King, although my feet is tired, my soul is well rested, and I will continue." And in Dr. King's first speech as leader of this historical movement, he told his colleagues one night, "Ladies and gentlemen, we must march on because first and foremost, we are American citizens. We're not advocating violence. The only weapon we have is our God-given right to protest. Because the great glory of American democracy is the right to protest for your rights." And although racists bombed his homes, he continued to march on and he continued to insist on nonviolent protests, thereby becoming the first public face in civil rights in America. And in 1957, with other ministers, Dr. King founded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to expand this nonviolent struggle against racism and discrimination throughout our land. I spoke earlier about the importance of reading Dr. King's famous letter from the Birmingham jail. Parents, while teaching our children to read, and as their first teachers, try to introduce them, if you can, to Dr. King's letter from the Birmingham jail. Let me share a few excerpts from that letter. Dr. King began by writing to the white ministers of Birmingham who had written an article about him in the Birmingham newspaper. He said, "Gentlemen," I quote, "while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement in the newspapers calling my present activities in Birmingham unwise and untimely." He said, "Seldom do I pause to answer criticisms of my work and ideas. If I stop to answer all the criticisms that cross my desk, my secretary will have little or no time for anything other than such correspondence. And therefore, I will have no time for the constructive work of the Lord. But since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I will try to answer your statements and what I consider to be patient and a reasonable term. Gentlemen, you ask, why am I here in Birmingham? And I say to you that I'm here in Birmingham because injustice is here in Birmingham. I must say to you that we as a race have not made a single gain in civil rights without determined legal and nonviolent pressure. You ask me why direct action, why sit-ins, why marches? Isn't negotiation a better path? He said, gentlemen, you're quite right in calling for negotiation. Indeed, this is the very purpose of our direct action, but nonviolent action, direct action seek to create such a crisis and foster such a tension that a community that has constantly refused to negotiate now is forced to negotiate and confront the issues of today. Because whether you know it or not, the purpose of our direct action program, gentlemen, is to create a situation so crisis-packed that it will be inevitably open the doors of negotiation. Because too long as our beloved Southland been bogged down in a tragic effort to live in monologue rather than dialogue. We as a race have waited more than 340 years for our constitutional and God-given rights. Like Paul, I must constantly respond to the Macedonian call for aid. And moreover, gentlemen, I am cognizant of the interrelatedness of all communities and states. Yet I cannot sit idly by in Atlanta and not be concerned about what happens in Birmingham, because injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And Dr. King went on to say that I realize that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny, because whatever affects one directly, it affects all of us indirectly. Never again can we afford to live with a narrow outside agitator ideal, because anyone who lives inside the United States can never be considered an outsider anywhere within its borders, because this is my country too. Would you know that the nations of Africa and Asia have moved with jet-like speed towards gaining their political independence? Why then, gentlemen, do we creep with buggy-like speed towards gaining the right to a simple cup of coffee in a restaurant? And perhaps it's Perhaps it's easy for those of you who have never felt the stinging dots of segregation to say, wait. But when you've seen vicious mobs lynch your mother and your father at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whims, when you've seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and sick dogs and fire hoses on our brothers and children, when you've seen your father's name become nigger and your middle name become boy, and your wife and mother are never given the responsibility of Mr. and Mrs., then, gentlemen, you will now understand why we find it very difficult to wait. The night before he was shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee, he said that people, we've come to a hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of the now, not wait. There's no time to gauge in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real our promise of democracy. Now is a time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of discrimination to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is a time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. People, as we walk, we shall make the pledge that we shall march ahead and we will not turn back. Yet there are those who are seeking, the devotees of civil rights. When will you be satisfied? And the answer is very simply, we can never be satisfied as long as our people are the victims of unspeakable horrors and police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels and highways and at the hotels of our cities. We cannot be satisfied. No, we are not satisfied. And we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like the mighty stream. Just a few years ago, Dr. King's birthday became a national holiday, a day that all young people, especially our elite students, fraternities and sororities, should roll up their sleeves and go out into depressed neighborhoods and spend this day helping the poor in any way that can, because your degree from Dartmouth qualifies you to make a difference. This, young people, is a day on and not a day off. Barack Obama, an American, Afro-American, has become president of the United States and has taken his rightful place in the senior management of his country. With hard work and dedication to mankind, you can and you must do the same. Yes, it was because of Rosa Parks who sat that Dr. King march so Obama could run. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. King truly believes that we are all born with rights, and among these, the most important ones are our human rights. He believed in the Constitution of the United States until he died. On one day, he attended the first integrated graduation of Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, and someone informed him that a National Guard was waiting outside to escort him and provide his safety. And he said to that young soldier, "Young man, it's not the National Guard that protects me. It's the Constitution of the United States of America that protects me." He said, "We are a nation of people who came from other parts of the world, but we have not become the melting pot envisioned by many of our ancestors. Yet, in America, why is it that our rituals of separativeness remain stronger than our rituals of togetherness? Our society today can be viewed as a quilt, where each square in this quilt is comprised of its own unique design, but these squares are stitched together by a common thread called America. Yes, we can be viewed as a mosaic, where each of us is a tile of a different shape, style, and color, but collectively, ladies and gentlemen, we create the most beautiful painting and a piece of art that could only been painted by the hand of God. Dr. King reminds us that we live in the only country in the world where people from every country in the world live. That is, therefore, it is a responsibility at Dartmouth to ensure all of its students of their inalienable right to human dignity. A rainbow society at peace with itself, ensured of your inalienable right to human dignity, then and only then will we overcome. And I know that you want to hear about those dynamic titans partially created by Mrs. May. And believe me, nothing gives me better thrills than going around the country talking about what these young men stood for. Because these young men stood for respect, embracing diversity, teamwork, leadership, and the importance of character among anything, and even community involvement, even today. This is why the movie Remember the Titans is not about football. It is about respect, character, and how one can accept the soul of an individual rather than reject that individual based on the color of their skin. And this, ladies and gentlemen, takes respect, where respect becomes trust, and that trust becomes the emotional glue that tends to bind communities and teams together forever. And I've always told the Titans when I coach them that you must give positive consideration to the thought that everybody on this team just deserves to be respected. And I don't care if you like each other. Heck, I don't like half of y'all. But you will respect each other. To respect will become trust. And I almost died when I heard them telling jokes about each other's mother in the locker room. I wondered if they had ever heard a word I said when I told them to adopt a value system of belief for treating people respectfully at all times. But they should watch their beliefs. The legendary Vince Lombardi of the Green Bay Packers once said, "Men, watch your belief, they become your thoughts. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions become your habits. and watch your habits become your character. And without character, you can never have a legacy. I was wondering sometime today that if you were walking down what is viewed as the toughest, roughest, if there's such a street in Hanover, at 12 o'clock midnight, and you noticed three boys walking briskly behind you, what color would you pray that they were? Don't answer. Because learning early in life to appreciate the differences in people instead of having to fear them will ensure that you'll embrace diversity, because diversity is not about the color of one's skin. Diversity is about who you are as an individual, and given the opportunity, all of you will and can succeed. But you must remember that the word success is only a word that comes in front of hard work in a dictionary. And it's said that in too many, diversity remains just the top of the presentation. I'm sorry, but that's not the way it works. I was fascinated when I read a statement from Dr. Kim when he wrote, "Dartmouth College is where success began," I'm quoting. And we believe that it is due in a large part to the diversity of our students. Dr. Kim continued by saying, "We value the diversity of each individual, and we demonstrate this by treating all of our students and staff with dignity, fairness, and respect, support and enforce learning, and work environments free from any form of harassment, discrimination, and promote access to college procurement to suppliers that reflect our community," unquote. What a powerful statement, Dr. Kim. Young people, we've got to move to another level, because diversity means, in short, becoming open to what has been shut to many people. And many people think that diversity comes out of nowhere. That's not true. Diversity builds upon the growing pains, abuses, and the suffering of the great freedom movement of our time. I was in South Carolina a month or so ago, and as I spoke on diversity, this elderly gentleman came up to me, "Coach Boone, very good speech. You know, I want you to know I've been part of diversity for many years now. You know, most of my friends are colored." I said, "Sir, the Lord does work in mysterious ways, doesn't he?" Our country is a very young country, and the work of making ourselves safe for diversity has been going on as far and as long as our country has. Because, as I said before, in most America, our rituals of separativeness continue to be better developed than our rituals of togetherness. Diversity, young people, includes age, religion, socioeconomic, and not only the silent assumption that we all seem to carry. And I realize that each of us has routines that we all go through on a daily basis, routines that we've made into our comfort zone. And there are many routines that we all go through and we do with no thought, like we go to the same grocery store and we pick up the same groceries, and sometimes we go through the aisles of the grocery store and pick up the same type of soap to take a bath with. We've used this soap now for many years. How many of you don't take showers? Raise your hand. No, don't do that. Because the people who are sitting beside you already know who you are. Another routine is racial comfort zone. And as a former coach, and now I can consider a speaker, I get the opportunity to travel and view people all over the world. And what I've noticed in corporations and high schools and colleges that I speak to is people usually work and go to school every day together with no problem. However, when it comes time for lunch, this is where America becomes divided, the same as 11 o'clock on Sunday. I notice in the lunchrooms of America, we have white people sitting in one corner, black people in another corner, Asians in another corner, Native Americans in another corner. Folks are just in their own racial comfort zone. Is there anything wrong with this? Not particularly. But young people, if we are to grow as individuals and be challenged, we must look for opportunities to invite folks who don't look like us into our sphere of influence. When I coached the Titans in my first year at T.C. Williams and we were ready to ride the bus to Gettysburg, I purposely separated those two buses into offense and defense because those teams and those kids needed to bond with each other. Do you think I was challenged? Those players looked at me like I had lost my mind. But you cannot grow, young people, unless you're challenged, and you can't be challenged unless you're willing to move out of your comfort zone. You cannot be challenged, and you will not grow unless you learn, and until you can learn to embrace the differences in all people, because to embrace the difference in all people is the only way that you will embrace diversity. Because the true meaning of diversity is defined as any combination of individuals who are different in some ways and similar in others. Whose job is it to create diversity here on this campus? Is it President Kim's? Most of us concluded that dealing with something as complicated as diversity should be left to the university and managers of businesses and the government and the president of colleges and universities. And we as individuals, we tend to keep quiet about our feelings, waiting for the administration and bosses to figure out the position. Well, we were wrong. Because diversity is not the college president or management problem, it's a fact of modern organizational life, and everyone at this college, top to bottom, must contribute to it. Because if genuine diversity is to thrive here at this campus, it will be because the right climate has been created, and I believe President Kim has raised the bar in diversity. You must ask yourself, am I comfortable working with people or going to school with people from all demographic groups? Is there a group or groups that I struggle to accept? If so, how have I attempted to overcome my bias? Do I enjoy diversity? If so, what kind? If so, how much? You know, young people, it's hard to admit things we're not good at, but you can't improve if you can't face the truth, but instead be proud that you're willing to make the effort. Be positive. Don't beat up on yourself, and above all, be honest with yourselves, because today's corporations recognize that their strength will come from the dedication, experience, and diversity of their employees. And if you want a job today that will pay you well, you must find and embrace diversity. And you must make a difference. My father used to say, neither one of you will affect the break of day. The sun is going to rise, boy. And when day does break, and if you do not plan to make a difference, then take your butt back to sleep. And don't forget to dream, because dreams have no expiration date. We must find young people, the entire world is waiting for your talents, especially those of you who are positive, energetic, fearless, and you are not afraid to take the plunge for what you believe in. Those who are not afraid to take responsibility for your own actions and not blame others. Those who do not insult people or make fun of them. Those who give value to other people's opinion and allow and respect their different beliefs, because you can never live in peace and comfort if people around you are always on the defense. If you put people down because of their looks, their clothes, their skin color, their accent, their attitude, intelligence, peer group, race, religion, none of these young people will allow you to take your rightful place in the senior management of your country. I ask you today to use your education to enhance the quality of your personal life first, but also use your education from Dartmouth to help others who may not have had the same level of access and opportunity you have. Because young people of Dartmouth, you are the light of the world, and you are the salt of this earth. And because of your education here, your light will continue to shine for generations and generations to come. However, you must be reminded that you're also the repairers of the breach. But you are expected to become engineers of bridges that you can build between people strong enough to carry all people across into the land of unity, dignity, and respect. this was a dream of Dr. King. So because the world has always been fascinated with his words of hope in all of Dr. King's speeches, especially one, I Have a Dream. He said, people will on the move now. No wave of racism can stop us now. The bombing of our homes will not stop us. The beating and killing of our clergy and young people will not divert us. So let us march on against segregated poor schools, against housing until every ghetto and social economic depression dissolves, and until blacks and whites, Latinos, Asians, Jews, and Gentiles and Native Americans can live side by side in peace. Dr. King raised all of us to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world. Dr. King raised all of us so that we can swim the mighty rivers and climb the mighty mountains of life. He raised us to be strong. He raised us to overcome adversity. He reminded me years ago of a German Jewish doctor, a pastor in Germany, Dr. Neumöller, who said, when the Nazis came for the trade unionists, I did not speak up because I was not a trade unionist. Then the next day, the Nazis came for the Catholics, and I did not speak up because I was not a Catholic. Then the next day, the Nazis came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then the next day, the Nazis came for me. And as I looked around, there was no one left to speak up and speak out and stand up and speak out for me. Therefore, I challenge you, because of your education and training here at Dartmouth College, an esteemed college in this nation, it certifies you, young people, to stand up. It certifies you to speak up and speak out. And I wonder, in closing, what Dr. Martin Luther King would say to us this evening if he were to return here. A reporter asked me this today, and I thought about this. And I think I know. I think he would say to all of us, people, we did a great job in some things and not a great job in others. I know he would say to all of us that I did not live and die to see the American family destroyed. I think he would say that I did not live and die to see 13-year-old boys get their hands on automatic weapons and gun down 9-year-old children for kicks. I know he would say that I did not live and die to see young people destroy their own lives with drugs, then build their fortunes by destroying the lives of others. This is not what I lived and died for. Yes, I fought for freedom, but not for the freedom of people to kill each other with reckless abandon. I know we would say that I did not live and die for the freedom of children to have children, and the fathers of these children abandon these children on the streets of America as though they never existed. And I think he would say to all of us that I fought for people that have the right to work, but not have whole communities and people abandoned when their jobs and hope relocate to foreign countries, leaving our communities desolate and without health care and with crime, where most young Americans, there are most young African Americans that are locked up in American jails today than are enrolled in every college and university in America. This is not what I lived and died for. I must close, but before I do, let me remind you that people, we must continue to live the dream and honor the work and visions of Dr. Martin Luther King. We must learn to accept and celebrate our differences rather than allow our differences to be a problem in our community. And to do this, we must all act now to give our children a future. We must all act now to take away their guns and give them books. We must act now to take away their despair and give them hope. And we must, by the content of our character, so that our children will have permission to win and succeed. We must act now to rebuild our families and neighborhoods and our communities, or all of us will perish off the face of the earth. Lastly, I think it's very important. We must demand that our children pull their pants up from way below their below so that they will be able to take their rightful place in the senior management of their country, the United States of America. We must do this, and we must do it without hesitation. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot take a day off. We must do this because this was his dream, and this is why you're here this evening. You're here to remember his dream, act on his dream, because his dreams do not come with an expiration date. We're here for the future of our children because our children will replace us. I hope not too soon. And if we do the things that Dr. King asked us to do, then and only then will our children have permission to win. And winning is very important in our culture. How many of you out there this morning, this evening, told your children this morning before they went to school or the last day they went to school, now guys, don't forget to come in second today. Raise your hand. Because winning is important. If it were not so, why do we keep the score? You know, Dr. King loved music, especially gospel. But there's one song he loved a great deal, not so much of the rhythm, but the words of the great Frank Sinatra. And the rhythm and the lyrics go like this. What is a man? What has he got? If not himself, he has not. To say the things you truly feel and not the things of one who kneels. Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I must do what I have to do, and I must do it without exemption. I must plan each careful step of my life, each step along the byway, and it is God's will, I'll do it my way. Dr. King said, yes, I was a drum major. I was a drum major for justice. I was a drum major for peace. I was a drum major for all peoples of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to tell you that throughout the day here at Dartmouth, I have never been so inspired, so much in my life as I was today having dinner with some of the most brilliant and dynamic students I've ever met in my life. And let me thank all of you for this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have spent some time with some quality people in the world, people of Hanover, people of Dartmouth College. I thank you and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Coach Boone, for that inspirational speech. At this point, we'll open up the floor to the audience. If you have any questions, we'll have 2 microphones at the left and right over here, and we'll form lines for those of you wishing to ask questions. We do have a few guidelines that you keep your questions brief, that they are in fact questions and you aren't making a statement, and that you are considerate of other people coming after you, and you keep your questions brief. So at this point, we will open up the floor to questions.
May I ask the first question? No. Sunshine, his name is Ronnie Bass. He calls me every day, and he says, Coach, let's see where you're going to Dartmouth. Would you please tell those students I did not kiss Gary? So I'll be happy to answer any question. I know that you probably want to talk about the Titans, and you want to know that everybody in the world wants to know, Coach Boone, was the movie true? You know, did we do this or did we do that? I cannot conceive that you took a team to Gettysburg College. Yes, I took a team to Gettysburg College. You saw I ran them through the swamp at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, I might be crazy, but I'm not stupid to run some parent-child through some swamp at 3 o'clock in the morning. I took them on a bus at 9 o'clock at night. So that's the part that's true. Let me avail myself for any questions that you may have, and I truly hope that I am able to answer them to the best of my knowledge.
Hi, Coach Boone. My
Hi.
name is Jalil Bishop. I'm a sophomore here at Dartmouth College. And I was just wondering, as you talked tonight about perseverance, what were some of the things you came back to throughout your experience that helped you kind of overcome some of the challenges you faced as you tried to unite this football team?
Well, first of all, you have to believe, and I said that you have to believe not only in your faith, you have to believe in your parents, you have to believe in your community. I had faith, and I still have faith, that, you know, I knew Dr. King, and I've lived my life, and I dedicated my life to living out the visions and dreams that all people are equal. And I persevered because I would not allow anybody to make me who they wanted me to be, so that they had the right to laugh at me for what I am. And I stood up to injustices. I stood up to racism. And I stood up to a whole bunch of things. And I found that, you know, being a man, you must stand up and take the plunge for what you believe in. If not so, then there'll never be a legacy. So have something that you believe in, because you must have faith to believe. And your beliefs will cause you to have character. So my perseverance and ability to stand up was because I had belief, and I still believe, and I'm not afraid to take the plunge for what I believe in. Thank you.
Coach Boone, thank you again for coming to Dartmouth. You
No,
spoke about this a little bit earlier today, but I was wondering if you could kind of go back and revisit this
You're
question.
Chris, right?
Yes.
All right.
Hello. And can you talk about kind of the conflict you faced with the exposure your family got during all of these, throughout this time, as you were obviously standing up in front of your community?
A great deal of adversity. And this was long before Allison May got there, so she probably didn't know anything about this. You saw in the movie where, you know, there was a brick that came through my window. Well, that was not a brick. That was a whole toilet. The whole toilet. And I needed a toilet, too. And it was porcelain, and it shattered and broke in my windshield as it came through my window. And I looked at that toilet there on my floor, all shattered. And my wife was crying, and all I was thinking about was, I wish that toilet had stayed in whole, and I would have kept it and hooked it up. But you have to have a sense of humor. I used to meet with the Titans every day before practice, and I always start out my team meetings with something of a sense of humor. And I told my Titans, and I told my children, who were chased home every day by men riding in trucks and wanted to beat up on them because they were my children. And I said that life is not easy, and you will experience adversities. But this is what you do with adversity. I reminded them of the story about this blind man who was walking down the street with his seeing-eye dog. And for some reason, this dog took this blind man across the street against the light. Cars were swerving all over the street, running into the light poles, into buildings to avoid hitting this blind man. So when the blind man got across the street safely, he reached in his pocket and he gave his dog a biscuit. This little old lady looked at him like he had lost his mind. She couldn't stand it anymore. She went up to him and said, "Sir, I don't mean any harm, but why would you reward that dog? That dog took you through all kinds of adversity. That dog almost got you killed. Why would you reward that dog?" The blind man patiently listened. "Said, ma'am, I don't mean any harm, but I didn't reward my dog by giving him that biscuit. I gave him that biscuit to find out where his head is so I can kick him dead in his rear end." And that's exactly what you have to do when adversity creeps into your life. You must kick it in the rear end and keep on rolling. I told the young people today, here's one of them today, it's not how hard you fall, it's how many times you can what? Get up. Through all kinds of adversity. You think it was tough? The students, the kids at T.C. Williams were the greatest kids in the world. It was the parents that kept me up all night. It was the parents that gave me the greatest whatever. They just beat up on me until I was half a man in the morning. But I had to deal with them because respect is trust. And trust is the emotional glue that will bind you together even with your enemies or those who profess to be your enemies. No, they didn't want me as head coach of T.C. Williams. I did not deserve that job. And I tell the world Coach Yost should have been appointed that job. But to have appointed Coach Yost would have meant that all coaches in that city, every single head coach in that city would have been white. Now, why would you combine 3 high schools, 3 traditional high schools, and come up with 21 white head coaches? But amidst all of that controversy, Coach Yost and we found the way to put our differences aside, and we mold a group of angry and unfocused young boys into the most dynamic football team in America. And we became friends for life. If we don't talk to each other 4 or 5 times a week, one of us is dead. And as old as we are, we call each other to let us know that we ain't dead. He's one of the most dynamic human beings I've ever had the opportunity to be associated with. And yes, his grandfather was a dragon of a Ku Klux Klan in Alabama. He was from Alabama, but it's not where you're from. It's where your heart lives. You understand? She's a beautiful child. Next question.
Well, you just answered my question a little bit. One of the things that when I watch this movie with my kids, we talk about, well, who had it worse, Coach Boone or Coach Yost? And, you know, looking at the challenges that each one of you had to confront. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the partnership that the two of you had, and also even between Gary and Julian, that the success of that team couldn't have happened without that sort of partnership and each of them taking pretty considerable risk in terms of what they did and what that meant for their future in the town that they lived in. So that really struck me. And you just talked a little bit about that, but I wonder if you could...
forgot half of the questions already. But anyway, the relationship between Julius and Gary was a strange one. Julius was a Black Panther sympathizer. Gary was, relatives were members of the White Citizen Council. And Gary wrote in, I think it was August 9th, 1971, Washington Post, that he would never play with the N-word. He had never played with the N-word, and he would never play with people of the N-word. And one day, Gary, with his racist philosophy, drove to school, and he parked his car in a little area we call Chinquapin. And 5 black kids jumped him. And by that time, Julius, who hated Gary, and Gary hated Julius rode up. And Julius, as big as this auditorium, Julius beat up all 5 black kids, single-handedly, downing them. And Gary said, he beat these black kids up for me. And he wrote in previous newspapers that we began to talk. We began dialogue. And he said that I found out that much of what my family had taught me was not true. Julius Campbell has the biggest heart God has ever put in the chest of any human being. He is the most dynamic human being you will ever want to meet. Those two became inseparable. Even after Gary's death, Julius every month goes to Gary's grave and cleans it off and put fresh flowers on the grave. They have become friends for life. So have all the members of the Titans football team. If you think I'm lying, you look on your computer, www.71 Original Titans, and see for yourselves. That team has produced brain surgeons in Mesa, Arizona, generals in the United States Army, chief of police in Alexandria, Virginia, and throughout the world, mayor of a little town in California, Kurt Smokes. And it has produced some people who have found the way to celebrate their differences rather than allow their differences to be a part of a broken community. It's one of the most amazing stories that I have ever seen in my life, and I wish I had written it, but it was not written by me. But I hope that answers some of your questions. I don't remember the other half, You're good. But I'm glad I answered already. You're good. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you for sharing that. I wanted to know what your own personal process with diversity has been. You instilled such great values of diversity in your players, and so I wanted to know what influences and what experiences influenced you to help you grapple with the issues of diversity in order to inspire your players the way you did.
My father could not read his name if he saw it. But he was the most brilliant person I've ever seen in my life. My father said, "You're not guilty of a crime because your mother is Cherokee Indian. You're not guilty of a crime because half of you is black. You're not guilty of a crime because you're Baptist. You're not guilty of a crime because you are who you are. Be whatever you can be, but be the best. But never, ever charge any human being guilty of a crime based on that color." And that remains with me to this day. And any of my players would tell you, yes, Coach Boone is crazy. He will go up one side of you and down the other, and then he'll turn around and he'll hug you and kiss you. He loved his players, not because of their talent, but because we have to teach these young people to replace us. And I've had some darn good training in my life. Among the best in my life was my father, and there was an instructor at T.C. Williams High School named Mr. George Weber. He spoke 10 languages, black. He was the most dynamic human being you've ever seen in your life. He would go to a black restaurant at lunchtime and carry me with him to eat chitlins. And he was worldly known to be the best teacher placed on the face of this earth. We had parents in Alexandria, and Allison May would probably bear this out. We had parents in Alexandria who would pay $1 million to get their children in Mr. Weber's class because he imparted such values and such beliefs that you could not. And all of these kids went to the major universities throughout the world, and they exceeded better than anybody because they had gone through the values of Mr. Weber. And I learned a great deal from Mr. Weber. And one thing, I learned to keep my mouth shut. But these were the things that influenced me early in my life, growing up in a segregated school system, reading and having to learn from hand-me-down books and getting hand-me-down clothes from the Salvation Army. But clothes don't make who you are. It's the heart inside that makes you who you are. It's the belief that makes you who you are. And no person is guilty of a crime based on the color of his skin. If there's anybody that feels that they are, give me the sentence and I would serve it for you. Well, I thank you for your hospitality, and I've had the greatest time of my life today with those young people that I met from the softball team. Where are you guys at? Oh, stand up. There you are. There you are. Let me give you a hand there. I had the best time from those on that football team. Where are you guys? Are you here? You're going to get slaughtered if you're not. All right. And you promised me that you're going to beat Harvard next year, right? And I might come up to see it. And you don't want to be around if I'm there and you don't beat Harvard. So let me thank you all for your gracious hospitality, and more than anything else, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me to spend some quality time, not only with a quality president, Dr. Kim, but some quality people here in Hanover. Thank you, and y'all keep the cold snow to yourselves. I'm going back to Florida. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our keynote ceremony events. You are all invited, this includes people in the Moore Theater and Dartmouth 105, to attend the reception at the top of the hop. Thank you and good night.